Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Emily Moyer. Michael Wann is with me. This is Project Kids number 5, and it's been an extra week since we normally do it. So we have a lot to talk about, but before we do, I want to update you all on the goings on here. Thank you so much, first of all, for all of the interaction and sharing of stories and ideas that people have been throwing at me. We are, actively working on creating an interactive aspect to this project. And so I have some announcements about that today. We will continue, I think this is what we're gonna do. We're going to continue to do 2 things a month, right? That's what we've been doing. One of them will be just exactly as we've been doing it, where there's a public hour and a private hour, and it's just Michael and I talking. And then for the second one of the month, I think what we're gonna do is we're going to either have some of these people who've been sharing interesting ideas and thoughts with me join us for a conversation in the first hour, or in some cases, if the person is sort of camera shy and not wanting to do that, but we think it's an interesting idea, we may kind of talk about this and sort of dig into that, because it's interesting to consider sort of other people's kind of like stories or narratives that they have for themselves and their mystery in life and whatnot, and sort of see what else we can sort of pull from that. And we're looking for really interesting synchronicities here and ways of thinking about things that we can use to open new portals to avenues of exploration and things like that. So I think we're going to have a segment of the show that may be public or maybe for patrons, but is recorded. And then we're going to have a segment that is not recorded, kind of like what I've been doing with Conspiracy Cocktail, that where people can join in. It will be like a group conversation. And I've found that having it not be recorded lends to a certain kind of spontaneity and openness that I've just not seen on recorded conversations. And it also provides the ability to be able to say something that you might not otherwise say without the threat of having somebody bring it back to you in 30 years about some crazy thing you said on a recording. And I think that's nice as well. So we're going to do it like that. This will be a special level that is a new Patreon level that will be created for this on my Patreon. Some of those proceedings will be shared with Michael for this project. And for people who are only interested in this show of mine and are not patrons, there'll be a way for you guys to join into based on PayPal donations. And so all those details will be forthcoming, but I wanted to put that out there. So I hope that's interesting to people. Anyone else has some interesting idea or suggestion, we're certainly open to considering that as well. But I think we want to get started on this, kind of creation of our own little think tank for the multitude of possibilities. We're starting to zero in on some of the things that have made us interesting to the minders for all of these years, and those skills and those abilities belong to us, and we are just as entitled to use them as they were. More so, we actually have sort of the birthright to them, and it's time to start using it for shit we like instead of complaining about how they were used for shit we don't like. So that's where we're at with that. And now on with the show, Michael, welcome back.
I'm happy to be back. I want to pick up immediately from where you were just talking. Reality is up for grabs. Like literally right now, like that's where we are. Like reality's up for grabs. And then the question becomes, well, what are you going to do about it? And so this is what we're doing about it. It's like we're recognizing all of these different things, and we don't want to circle back necessarily into that paradigm we all grew up from, but like what can we extract, how can we grow and really like tap into the skill sets that this seems to resonate with, and then the timing of the events of what's actually happening right now. Now's the time, and I guess in a certain way here's the place.
Absolutely. And some of the things we're going to talk about in this first hour today, Michael and I have each been on an adventure since the last show, and we have some things to share about it. And some of the observations and experiences I had on mine, and I'm sure that Michael had on his, give some insight into some of the possibilities regarding the reality up for grabs idea that Michael just laid out. So, so you had an adventure, so did I. Let's start with your adventure. Yours is more fresh. You just
all right.
Yours, and so let's go for yours because it's probably still really fresh and energetic in your mind.
Right. So let me give you the the overview in the beginning. So I'll give you my overview and then I'll hear your overview. And then there's like a certain place I'd like to go down, or there are a couple different places. But anyway, so the overview was Jenny and I were taking a trip to Tennessee, to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and then to see her father. And then we were going to go and see then a grandmother who lives in North Carolina, but we're meeting in South Carolina, like kind of in the Asheville area. And it was like stepping into this, like we're looking at it from a perspective of like, you know, this is a timing of a lot of different things, like, you know, personal, collective, you know, geological, like all of these different sort of things, which are, you know, lenses in which we just like see life through. Like, wow, this is this perfect alignment. And we were going like from a more basic level, we were going from like what it's like to live in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, like South Central PA, which is, you know, it's not really that rural. I wouldn't call it rural at all, but there are parts of it that are, but it's not thought, it is slightly different than the typical Washington, D.C. to Boston. That there's a certain consciousness, which, you know, there's each a little bit individual. Lancaster's part of that, but it's different than that. So it's like going from that perspective to then deep into like Appalachia.
I think the people from there say Appalachia, but everyone else.
Is that it? Yeah, I never say it. Like I want to say it the right way. I just don't know how to do it. They always can. But like going through that and just like experiencing that, like just in terms of like how people are living their lives relative to quarantine, relative to the virus, relative to like strangers. And then also, you know, I look at everything from this very kind of like synchromystic lens. And so I'm seeing it from that lens too, particularly with the rivers there, the forests there, the history there, how it all connects. And it was challenging, satisfying, like intensifying, like completion, like all of these like different sort of superlatives, you know, to describe a trip. Yeah, it was all of that. And so but it seems to be in alignment with like how the last 100 days have been.
Yeah. Yeah. No, ours was kind of like that as well, right? We went to Phoenix, which was a place we had been to just the month before. Laura's family lives there. So we had been there and it had been really nice. Like everything had been fairly like flowing and peaceful, both with her family and in terms of our experience, sort of just like integrating into, you know, what was going on there. And it was very free and open there compared to here in Los Angeles, right? Like, yeah, there's some businesses were still closed or modified or whatever, but most places were open. Lots of places was no masks, or just, you know, if you want to wear a mask, fine. If you don't want to wear a mask, fine, right? But it was pretty much like choose your own adventure, right? You could kind of go any way you wanted with it. And, you know, felt very nice and very relaxed. And it was like, oh my God, this feels so pleasant. Like maybe we should move here or something, right? This feels amazing. And so going back just a month later, it was a completely different experience, right? They were experiencing the kind of spike or surge or whatever, and then the you know, the attached paranoia that we had had here in Los Angeles in March. And so it was incredibly edgy there. People were incredibly anxious. It just had this vibe, like it was almost the same kind of vibe that I remember like during the period of time. I kind of divorced myself from it this time, but during the period of time when like the Rodney King riots were going on, that even if there wasn't something happening, there was this edginess on the streets. It just felt like every time you went out, it was like, whew, when you got back to the Airbnb or the hotel, you felt like kind of like relieved to be back, like, you know, in your own little space kind of thing. And everything was difficult, right? Everything like was challenging, like was annoying, didn't happen smoothly. But if you kind of held your own through that and didn't let yourself like get super upset or super angry, in every circumstance, there seemed to be a way over, around, under, or through into kind of another opportunity or experience that maybe was different than the one you would have had if everything was smooth, but was all the things, all the superlatives that you mentioned before, right, were enlightening. And we kind of came back with this feeling like Jeff, my friends Jeff and Vanessa also were there. Jeff Gates, who does a lot of stuff with me here, and his comment a few days after we got back was, "I have no idea what that walkabout was about, but it felt necessary and it feels complete." You know what I mean? And so we can get into some of the details of some of this as we go along, but it did open my eyes to like, okay, like everything looks messy, but if you sort of find this little crack in the wall over there and go through that, there's like a little hidden space over there where you can kind of do what you want, or like, just like, you know, the elites or the people controlling things or whatever are using this whole thing as a distraction, right? To be over here doing shit that nobody else is paying any attention to. We can sort of use it as well. Everybody's like focused and worried about one thing. Nobody's looking at what's going on over here. So if you can find something to do over there, you're going to be sort of free to do it with nobody watching, which is kind of interesting. You know what I mean? So that what you're talking about as far as reality being up for grabs, I think reality is up for grabs, time is up for grabs in whatever circumstance, whatever way you think it exists, and there's actually space up for grabs as well, right? And I don't mean space like out there, but just like literally like portions of cities or streets or blocks or whatever that are seemingly you know, yours for the taking. And I don't mean like squatters' rights, but I mean nobody's doing anything over here, so you can go do what you want over here, where it's usually a very crowded place, right? So that's been kind of interesting. So yeah, so that was kind of our experience. So
it was we left right when we left from Pennsylvania. There was a statement which was from the governor. All right, the guy's name is Wolf. You know, talk about his name's Wolf. But and I don't even want to. Before living in Pennsylvania, I had no idea the significance of like the Pennsylvania state politics. But I'll take you off one quick 30-second side note. Some elected official from the state of Pennsylvania called a press conference, this is like in the mid 80s, and he shot himself in the head and killed himself in front of all these reporters. Like, think about, that was like the big story like in 1980, but like this is an energy that's deep. Think about that being ahead of the curve in terms of shock nation. You know, that's about as shock nation as you get. So anyway, so Wolf is at this time, and Wolf just makes this so Wolf makes a statement saying that for now on, everyone's got to go and wear masks at all given times. This is my statement. Like, there's no legal teeth behind it, but this is said from an authoritative stage. Yeah. And so, and at the same time, it's saying if you are returning from any of these states, in Tennessee, which is where I was going to, if they were upon return, because they're having such high outbreaks, there's a 14-day recommendation of self quarantine. And so that's always, this was a new line which was just crossed. And so that was like the energy which we're leaving. There's a whole bunch of stuff. I just completed the church. I just did all sorts of things. And we go, and just out of really convenience, we found an Airbnb place in a little bit the midway point, which put us in like nowhere, Tennessee. All right. If you know where Johnson City, Tennessee is, we were like right outside that.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. There's a song you might know. So we get this place, which is like, I don't know, like everything kind of lined up aesthetically and like price wise and convenience wise, and we stay there. That was it. And so it turns out, like, we go there, and the bones, if you will, of the place were in like probably an early 1800s 1-room building, and then they like redid it, and it's this kind of like barnish sort of place, but it's a fun place to stay. And it's this beautiful agro resort, if you will. And the place was fantastic. We're like, wow, I can't believe we just found this. And we went to go get deep into town to get like good barbecue. And upon doing that, we see signs that says that this town is the birthplace of American President Andrew Johnson.
Oh, wow.
Who Who the hell is Andrew Johnson? Like, there are only 45 presidents, and like, this is the birthplace. And why that's interesting is, if you know any of my Susquehanna mystery work, it has to do with the fact that Lancaster's home of the U.S. president, James Buchanan.
Mm-hmm.
And so James Buchanan is universally recognized as the worst president in America because he was the president right before the Civil War.
Yeah.
Abe Lincoln took office, and like 1 week later, the Civil War breaks out. Like, you know, he inherited what James Buchanan created. So Andrew Johnson was Abe Lincoln's vice president. So when Lincoln was assassinated, Johnson becomes president. So these are the bookends. I'm going from the bookends from Lancaster to here. Like, if you start to think about like the synchromystic odds, like of the bookends of the Civil War as they're trying to stoke it like nobody's business. And I'm like, all right, we just found a wormhole.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so which just leads to another wormhole, because the Johnson City I was thinking of is Johnson City in Texas, which is named after Lyndon Johnson, who also took over from an assassinated president.
Holy crackers. That's exactly what, Jenny and I have been playing this game where do you have enough control over your facial, like your facial muscles, that you can wink one eye without moving anything else? Like, no, like, you know, just like as subtle as you can.
I don't know.
And it's like kind of a tricky thing. And here's the thing, it's a Masonic symbol. Like, part of, like, you know, Masonic symbolism is that ability to give like the wink of like, I'm signifying something of great significance. So I was kind of like, we're playing this game, and then I was telling the story, which I'm telling you right now, to Jenny. And there's like, are you familiar with the LBJ wink? And she said, what are you talking about? And so I went and I told the whole story about how, you know, LBJ was sworn in on the airplane ride from Dallas to Washington, D.C. Or at least that's the story that's presented to us. This is the first real like TV generation mental game, like to do to the whole JFK assassination, everything that went with it. But there is, if you're unfamiliar with it, it's one of the creepiest things that you can see. There's a picture right after him being sworn in, and it's this black and white figure, and you see like all of these like somber looking faces witnessing the swearing in of a vice president under this like kind of like very, very shocking circumstance. And there's this photograph of a guy giving a wink. And you can tell by from the angle of the picture, he's giving that wink to LBJ, and he's like, "You're in."
Yeah, because that was that was the operation. Absolutely, that this place that I'm thinking of. So LBJ, Lyndon B. Johnson, right? This city that called Johnson City is between Austin and Fredericksburg, right?
Okay.
Fredericksburg is like a little German town. About 80 miles west of Austin.
Right.
And it's actually a place that has a fairly good history of people like who were part of groups that were interested in possibly seceding, right? Or that Texas nation kind of people who think it's a separate country. So it's kind of an interesting place. Johnson City is on the way there. Yeah, I see. I'm looking at the wink right now. Johnson City is on the way there. And LBJ, Lyndon B. Johnson, but I think his wife, they also referred to her as Lady Bird Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
So they were both LBJs. I think there's also there might even be a lake in Texas called Lady Bird Lake. I think there's a lake there, which is interesting always because they love the reflections in the water and all that kind of stuff. But he brought in sort of the Great Society and the social programs and welfare state. Yeah. That is actually what the point of a lot of this stuff going on right now really is, right? Like all of these stuff with the virus and the social upheaval and things like that is basically the control system's attempt to expand that for people to be dependent. You know, we've seen more talk about things like UBI and whatnot. And if you think about it, Andrew Johnson, right, came in, it was very traumatizing, just like the assassination of, Lincoln and Kennedy were probably two of the most loved presidents, right? And so that assassinations create a trauma that then allow new things to be able to be pushed forward and to be installed, right? So that's kind of interesting connection between the two of them also. And it's interesting that they both have these very small cities named after them, right? Like really in the middle of nowhere between two other places.
And just to add to it, and I think we're going to continue this throughout the trajectory of this talk, is we also drove through Frederick, Maryland.
Right, that's an interesting
Right.
spot,
And
too.
that whole area was, as we were driving through it, and this is what I was thinking, our previous conversation, we talked a little bit about like West Virginia, and we talked a little bit about this camp where I remember going to as a child, and we drove through that town.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
Like just like by GPS. And that's
Yeah.
yeah, like so it was there was something very interesting when you look at like the conclusion of the first leg of our trip was Chattanooga, Tennessee. Have you ever been to Chattanooga?
I don't think so. I've been to Memphis. I've been to Memphis, and whatever, like we were driving when I was going back to go to college in West Virginia, and we were making the cross country trip, and we did go to Memphis, and what's the other big city?
Nashville.
Nashville. We went to Memphis, and we went to Nashville. We went to the Grand Ole Opry, which was a really interesting experience for folks from Los Angeles, right? That was kind of a different style of people and living and whatever. But no, I don't think I've been to Chattanooga, but I do feel like I feel like maybe there's one of those Dave Paulides cases with the missing 411 that happened in around the Chattanooga area. And I know Randy once interviewed somebody that had some story about some things that go on like in the mountains of Tennessee there, with like ships and with like things that go on under the ground there. So I know it's an interesting place, but no, I haven't been to Chattanooga, I don't think.
Really that whole part of the United States, which we've been conditioned to not want to look at, is incredibly significant.
Mm-hmm.
And we could judge that from a couple different ways, but like maybe one way of looking at it is the concentration of mound sites.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Whatever that may be, like this is where but Tennessee is particularly rich, and for me, I look at it through the rivers, but Tennessee, when you go in, and the couple things to think about it is Oak Ridge. Oak Ridge was where like the science and the math of like the splitting of the atom took place at the Oak Ridge National. It was during the Manhattan Project. I can't think of what the full name is, but there were like key different places. There was a Trinity site. There was this part of Tennessee, Oak Ridge, and then there was also what was being done in the Philadelphia, DC area, which was like all happening both like scientifically, but then also like magically simultaneously. And Tennessee undoubtedly is one of those places. I mean, all of Earth, whatever the Earth may be, different locales have certain attributes like the physical body does.
Mm-hmm.
And within the United States, Tennessee is like that whole like Arkansas, Tennessee, like West Virginia, like, yeah, the reason why no one's there is because you're not supposed to be there. That's meant. So anyway, that was, that's what it felt like to me, that the experience was traveling, at least on that level of reality, that energy level of reality, going from one place to another. Like there was like some sort of like, as I say, like wormhole, if you will, or cutting through. And the intention which I held in mind is like, what does the future look like without civil war, but without like tyranny? Like it was a question. Like it was more so like that. And so like, that's what, like, I felt like I was carving, like almost like, skiing through virgin snow and you're like carving something. Like it kind of felt like that. And so the reason why I tell that story is because two fascinating things occurred upon return. And it was like it was a lot of travel, and there was like a lot of there was a lot of energy which was, you know, experienced through it, like of all levels of like, you know, this was fun and this wasn't fun, but it was intense all the way around. um but then upon the return, um everything which was like really getting trumpeted up upon us leaving, upon return, was like, it was as if that didn't even happen. It was because the question we had was like, are people going to be following that? Are people going to be wearing masks outside? Like, is this being enforced? And not only was it not being enforced, it wasn't being discussed. It was like, we were like, did that even happen?
Right.
Did that actually happen? Did that get like diffused because no one remembers that? And when I say reality is up for grabs, it's this understanding. There's stuff that's trying to take place, but some of it's sticking and some of it's not. Like literally, like we're creating something just as stuff is being created for us.
Absolutely. No, I think there's definitely been some shifting of realities or timelines going on. I've noticed stuff like that, right? Like I've noticed that, you know, here at times it said, okay, all this stuff is shut down, but it's not. You go there and it's not shut down, right? Like if you're actually reading a lot of these edicts and orders and things like that that are coming down, like, and the way that they're being reported, like the top line makes it seem like this is it. This is the rule. This is the law. This is the mandate. Everybody has to do it. But if you read, the articles tend to be fairly long, and usually like there's something in between that makes it seem like the article is over, right? Like some ad for something that's actually quite big, or a picture or a link to a video that is not related. But if you scroll, the article continues. And then there'll be something like, you know, with this exception, that exception, this, that, and the other, which is basically exempting almost everything. But they know that most people only read headlines or hear blurbs or read the top part of the article. So they're looking to see how many people actually read, partially, I think, but also like they know that like largely the things that they're trying to do are not legal. Nobody has passed any laws in response to said virus. It's all been orders, edicts, and mandates, you know, and in codes and things like that. There's actually been no legislation passed. Mm-hmm. And so like, you know, but most people don't know. Like most people, this is the state of obedience people have gotten to, where it's just like you tell them to do something and they do it, right? So I think there's some of that going on, but there's also this sort of molded reality shifting, right? We used John Teeter as a jumping off point to Conspiracy Cocktail this past weekend. But we got into some things that were like, you know, maybe the easiest term for people to relate it to or understand it as is like personal Mandela effects that are going on, or like Mandela effects that aren't the kind like the Berenstain Bears or the whatever anymore, right? That are more like, I even had, as we were getting ready to do the John Teeter thing, like 2 particular personal Mandela effects in relation to my personal experience with that story back when I first found out about it, right? So there is something incredibly flexible and malleable about reality right now. And it's just like almost, it's like a game with your, remember we were talking about internal tests and mind games last time? Like if you just are like, okay, I'm not doing that, I'm going to go over here and do this, then like you can find, right, that you can find that. Or there's like this little charade that goes on at the entrance of a business where you're sort of playing with your mask, but once you go in, there's obviously no regard for masks, right? There's like, you know what I mean? So it's almost like some sort of organic outlaw spaces are beginning to sort of open up where they're not having to declare that as such. They're playing the game at the front door, right? Which is kind of what a speakeasy or
bingo.
Like, yeah.
So I'm you that was it. I just have to that was the word, speak easy. Like think about that. Think about what the world is like right now, and think about what does speak easy mean. Speak easy.
Yeah.
Speak easy. No one's speaking easy anymore.
Yeah.
No one's speaking easy. No one's speaking easy. And you're absolutely right. You in the beginning, with the description of the article, I mean, this is part of what the way I see it, at least, what this particular time is the practical, and the word practical has quotation marks on it, ways of navigating reality. because none of us, like, this is different than what any of us have been prepared for, but we're kind of figuring it out. And what you pointed out is like, this is how you kind of know what's going on. Read the full article, because the truth is they have to tell you the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it's mocking, part of it's this, there's like all these different layers. But at the end of the day is there has to be nothing, you are not going to be forced.
You're not going to be forced. And
you're going to be coerced.
It's all going to be, it's going to be that. But it's also like, and this has been, so one of the things that's been my frustration for many years now, related to a lot of things, but particularly, with all these things going on this year, has been the absolute obedience to authority of groups of people that at one time would have counted themselves as a counterculture or as an underground movement. And so I'm speaking mostly of the dance music community. They have been stay the fuck home, wear masks, right? Like, believe everything the government says, and then all doing the same prescribed social virtue signaling behavior regarding the George Floyd stuff, like everyone in lockstep. Like, no one's saying, you know what, I actually think it's a little different than that. Or like, what about like, we just let everybody decide for themselves and, we not have this be a monoculture. And there's been none of that. It's been absolute tyrannical obedience amongst people who like should understand what's happening here. I mean, one of the things that was so amazing and like such a tool that was developed in rave culture was like the idea of map points, right? The idea of like having to go on a treasure hunt to find the party, right? The idea of like codes to get through, penetrate sort of informational walls. None of that is going on with them. Like, their culture was training for this time, and they completely can't even see that, right? So one of the things that used to happen with parties is like, you sometimes had to drive to 2 or 3 points along the way before you found out where the actual party was. And what that did was it kept people who didn't actually really want to go to the party from just showing up to like check it out or whatever, right? Like, you had to sort of make an effort. You had to really want to be there, right? You had to pay attention. You had to know shit about the music, because you might be asked some question about who produced some track and and whatever, right? A way of weeding out like who are just the observers and who's actually like in on this, right? Like, all of these tools that were developed in order to be able to pull off, outlaw or illegal or private club kind of parties, were all these techniques were developed, and they're not making use of them. But guess what? I paid attention the whole way. And I paid attention. I participated both as a consumer and as a person who perpetrated, did some of these events and things like that. And to me, like, that's where this has to go. Like, I'm already seeing, part of the reason I started Conspiracy Cocktail as like an online speakeasy is because like I may advertise on like we're getting ready that like we're going to talk about this, right? But that's just a jumping off point and basically a cover for a deeper conversation that's going to happen about something else. But it sounds like I'm just being silly and like saying we're going to talk about all these outlandish topics, but it's really a cover for something else, right? And I think that like, and I know people who are in health right now that are doing things like turning their practices into quote unquote private clubs, so they don't have to obey all of these ridiculous mandates and whatever that are going on. So it means the people who want to come there have to fill out some additional paperwork saying that they're joining the club or whatever, right, for these people. But there's all this stuff that like we can do, because like you said, none of this stuff is law and none of it's going to be forced. So you're just going to have to decide where you're wanting to put your attention and your effort and whatnot. And there's a creative way around, above, through, whatever, all of these sort of fake obstacles that are being put in our place. But what it actually does, I think there's a benefit to this, in that you end up on the other side of that wall that you sort of have to figure out how to scale somehow with the people who also really want to be there, as opposed to the whole fucking crowd.
Totally. So that skill set in the general way. So each of, like, when I say us, I mean someone who this conversation resonates with. Right? Like, obviously it resonates with us because we're having it. And then like, if you're watching it and you're watching it from like, this is something that like, even if you're watching it like, with your eyes rolled, there's a part of you that's resonating with this or is connected. Otherwise you'd be watching something else. The truth is in the pudding. So anyway, this process we all are doing right now, and really what this conversation is, this idea of this summer camp, this Project Kids, it's dream tracking, You know, that's how I like to describe it. Like, you know, it's like everything's the dream. Like we've gotten to the point where it's like it's totally strawberry fields. Like, nothing is real. Like literally nothing is real. Um, you know, you're real, or as real as it is to feel like you, like it's inception. And it's like what the skill is this dream tracking of like the dream is the experience. Like it's literally what you're doing. It's like what this world is. And the tracking is some degree of rationality with it, because dream is all about imagination and creativity. But the tracking has a degree of like structure and the ability to, to see, to find truth. And so when you combine the two, like, whatever life is showing you, like, this is how you navigate, how you find those cracks. And what seemingly is happening is all of the other people who are kind of like dream tracking, like find each other.
Yeah.
Whether it's a club, whether it's like, I want to go back to this in a little bit, and if you could remind me this strange sync that happened with Freeman flying South Carolina on this trip. But it's like that's how it's just kind of it's going to be presenting itself.
Yeah.
And this is how we navigate it, and this is how we like move through it. That's what I see this whole conversation sort of thing being all about.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the things that sort of show up when you're just doing your thing, you're not necessarily out completely looking for them. Like you and I were just having our conversations with each other. You're like, I'm about to go through an interesting period of my life. I would like to record some of this in a conversation with you. And this turned into this whole other thing. And we're tracking exactly that. But what I would like to hear your synchronicity or whatever with Freeman, but we had some of that as well. Like, right? Like we were in Phoenix. We're doing something there. We do Conspiracy Cocktail from there. We're sort of talking about something, and somebody who's a listener pops up and is like, oh, I'm here, and there's this thing you should go check out in Scottsdale. And before we know it, we're there checking it out. We're meeting up with her afterwards for a drink, and I've met a person, now who like is kind of in on this whole thing. And it was like just like that. We met up with her for an hour, moved on. But it's like, okay, now we know this person. She's part of the crew. She's down on this conversation. She kind of fit right into the experience we were looking to have and gave us the clue that we sort of needed to have to sort of send us off on our way. And it was cool. So, you know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of like those sync ups are much more, I think, valuable right now than the highly organized ones, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly, it's certainly chaotic. So we went to, from Chattanooga, we went like kind of north of Asheville, North Carolina. Now, Asheville, North Carolina, if you're not familiar with it, like this is where the Vanderbilts built their largest mansion. This is where Biltmore.
Yeah.
This is the Biltmore. So at one point, it may still be like it was the largest, like whatever that symbolizes. And we're just talking about this in terms of symbols, because this is the language of the time, and the people was like symbols. So that's there. If you're familiar with the School of Esoteric Studies, which is like a major Alice Bailey type program, they're there. There's something called the DuPont National Forest there. It's incredibly significant to the Cherokee people. And like, it's so we went there just north of Asheville. We drove through that forest, that whole area, particularly along the Tennessee River and the French Broad River, was just like, it was so, energetically and like earth magic wise was, I'm very attuned to those stories. And I was just like, this stuff was just like, I can't wait to go and reveal those stories. I have the urge to like, I want to go and dive deep and know their history. But nonetheless, so we're going through this, and we were to go and meet some of Jen's family. And it ended up being in South Carolina, just below the North Carolina, South Carolina border. And it was like this small town, ended up being like this really kind of rich, fun experience. And that was like kind of like the completion of the trip for like the portion of like why we're going, because it was ultimately like driven by family was like, the motivation for this trip. and that was the completion. So like everything led up to that, and then there's the like, you know, the return 10-hour car trip, and so that's when it's being processed. And so as we start going back, and my mind is kind of like doing this kind of like reconciliation between personal story and larger story and all this sort of stuff, and I'm like, what is the model? It's like we all need a model, otherwise and what starts popping into my mind is, I don't know how much of a follower or a listener of Freeman, but there was a time like that I was listening to him every week, you know, that was like, and so like I have a very like as a listener, personal sort of or connection with him. I've been on his show once, and I bought like all of his stuff. So I start thinking about him because I'm like, he lives in South Carolina. I'm in South Carolina. And he's got this thing called the friendship agenda. That was like what he was talking about. Like, and I was like, and I always loved the idea of it, like 5-6 years ago, but I still had this, this kind of like attitude, like, isn't that nice? Like, it's not real. Like, there's still something. And I was thinking about it. I was like, that is the most sound piece of advice for what people are to do right now.
Yeah.
That is the most sound advice. We have to travel. Some people are travelers, some people aren't. We have to connect, and we have to see face to face, and we have to start building our own network. We have to do it like everything, and I was like, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, God, I'm like, that is like, you know, what does that look like? I'm just kind of like imagining that. And then I get this email from Freeman's producer saying, hey, could you come on a show tomorrow?
Yeah, Steve is my friend. Steve's actually who hooked us.
Yes.
And Freeman was only available because they canceled the trip, so they happened to be there when you were there.
Exactly. And so like everything, like, and he starts telling me like his perspective of the trip. So it was just this idea, and the reason why I'm sharing this is
so you got
like
together with him. So you ended up getting together with Freeman, or you did an episode
we did an episode like the day we returned.
Okay.
The day we returned, and it was just like, it was an example, I think, of the serendipitousness and like the effortlessness, but then like the like, just as you say, these cracks and this like coming together of those other dream trackers. And like, there's going to be an establishment of where it's not just this, it's not just like, you know, through an interface of ones and zeros and black glass and Ethernet and EMF, but like there's like an actual connection between human beings.
Absolutely. I mean, Laura and I have been like discussing future travel plans, and, you know, even future plans as to where we may want to ultimately live and whatever. And a lot of the things we're considering is like, okay, like some of our favorite interactors from from Patreon group, or listeners, or other people we know from this weird little community we're in, where are they? Where are the opportunities to meet up for a night, or to, you know, to have a fun little gathering or whatever? And that's becoming more the destination than like the monuments or the what, although that's nice too. But like, you know, travel's changing. Whatever is going on, like travel is changing. It's going to be a lot more like traveling by car, I think, in the future than it is flying from place to place. So even if we're going somewhere that's a destination, right? Which route are we going to take? Because we can stop and see so-and-so here and so-and-so there. And even if it's just getting together for an hour for a meal, right? Or that, you know, they have a place in town that they want to show you, you know, a monument or a natural, you know, wonder or whatever. You get there, you go, you have the conversation, and you really can find out if that person resonates for you. And like, are they part of your crew, right? Are they part of your little group going forward?
Well, it's got to somehow, you know, as we're like fleshing out this idea, like it's got to still have that element which you described of the parties you used to go to. Like you'd have to go to like one or two destinations, and it's like it works on multiple levels. It's fun. Like that's part of the experience. And it's like, you know what, only the committed are in it. But then also there's a degree of like, you know, of creativity and mentality and like all of that. And so, and then there's also like a safety mechanism. It's like, you know what, I want to be able to trace someone through, I don't know. and so that's got to fall into this thing. Like what we're describing, it cannot be just like ideas as much as like, okay, this is how this happens, and this is how we kind of like blend this world of still being able to interact with this mechanism that we have, but we're going to go and build like actual networks.
Yep.
And it's all going to be like formed. It's almost all formed by the negative space. You know what the negative space is?
Yep.
The space in between.
Yep.
The space in between the demarcation of like the system.
Yep.
It's all like, I'm not in the system. Like I'm able to do this because I don't have an immunity passport. You know, that's not, side note. I just went to the mail room. What do you call it? The post office of my local town, because I mail stuff, and I know the postal workers there. And there was like this new sign which was on there, and I just love being around people. I get a kick out of it. I just like to do it. So I go in. I love going to the post office, and I pay attention to all the details. There's a new sign there, and it says, "Due to the shortage, the national coin shortage, we will only." And I'm like, I don't think there's a national coin shortage. Like, I want to know more about this national coin shortage. And I bring this up to the postal workers, and they just start shaking their head. They're like, there ain't no coin shortage. And it was the funniest thing. And we're still kind of like, you know, there are still ways, for as long as it lasts, that, you know, I'll still use the systems until they close up. And then when they close up, I'll use the other systems. And in the meantime, like, it's like, 8-hour car rides. I'm going to say to you that the monuments are still there. It's still as important as any trip before. But the monuments, the driver, are like, who are the people who I want to go and see? Yep. And then their monuments there, whatever is in their backyard of the monuments. And when I say backyard, I mean it like literally and figuratively. Like, you know what? If you like to do research, see what's happened there. You know, what's accessible, because that's the energy you're going through. And that's so much friggin' fun. Like, to have that attitude. And
also when you're not like the monuments that everybody has spotlight, sometimes you go to them and like, we go and, like, you know, I have a little group that I often travel with, right? We each kind of have a different little spidey sense power or thing that we kind of do. So we'll go to some of these places, some of them like very well known, others not as well known, and some that we just find along the way that it might not even be anything to anyone else, right? And oftentimes, like, you're someplace that's supposed to be so special and be like, I don't feel anything. There's nothing special here. I don't feel anything. I don't see anything. Other times there is, but sometimes you're like, you know, I've taken a number of people who've come to visit me here in Los Angeles to Chatsworth, to where I grew up, which is not like, there's no big famous monument there, or there's a lot of weird stuff there. But whenever I take people there, they're like, this is the weirdest fucking place I've ever been, right? This shit is fucking weird. And you're only the people who live there or grow up there are going to know about that. So yeah, sometimes it's fun to go to someone and they can show you sort of their backyard and tell you the local mysteries or their own experience. And it may generate some thought or some idea particularly for someone like you or me who has no problem with making up a portion of the story that seems to be missing and allowing it to come through anyway. Right.
I mean, we got good instincts. You could direct it. The power spots are like, they're always hidden in the in-between space. Everything is always the in-between. Like, that's the value. Like, no matter how you want to look at it, that like twilight is the most magical of anything. Like, however you want to divine, like, the most interesting things, unique things happen in transitions.
Like the space between wake and sleep, right? When you're
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's where all the bugs come alive, like in that one time in one of the things which I think we're seeing right now, which is funny, is what either it was at one point, you know, however you want to go and describe it, but at one point there was a knowing within the United States that these certain coming to life of old cities, of like, you know, of great creativity and food and like, you know, art districts, and like, you know, this is the progress. And so there was a certain quality that came about in the urban environment really over the last 15 years, which when you go and you look at it, like it's kind of the same. Each like city may have its own unique flavor, but they're all dealing with the same sort of like underlying same value systems. And it used to there was always a part of it which was like being very like intellectually flexible. You know, it was that. And what we're seeing is like these are the places which are turning out to be the least flexible as is. And whether or not that's just like, you know, the natural folding in of itself of any sort of shell, or, you know, maybe it was always designed that way. Whatever the story is happening. But what's so friggin' funny is what we have all been taught to believe, primarily through like you know, what through popular culture, of what has always been the most backwards of American life and thought, within, how do I say it, Appalachia or
Appalachia.
Appalachia. That is actually the most flexible and forward thinking, which you're going to go and find within, you know, the United States. Like I'm coming from a place where I would go to like any sort of food store, and it would be 99% of the people are wearing masks and 1% are not. And as soon as I crossed over into a certain part of the world, where it went the complete other way around. The way people interacted with people, the way people like took the news, like I guess maybe because they've outgrown the popular culture, because they understand the ridiculousness of always being at the butt of the joke.
Yeah.
So there's like, well, of course they're a bunch of idiots because they've always called me an idiot regardless. So there's this irony of these pockets, like at least from my experience, have been much more flexible in terms of making up their own minds in terms of like, how people live, with the exception of these highly at one time, progressive cities that you can find in these parts. A part of Chattanooga, there was one part which was like filled with like anger and fear. There were some exceptions within it, but there was and there are other parts like no one even cared. And the same thing like I saw in Asheville as well.
Yeah. Asheville. So if you end up going back to Asheville to explore any of these things, let me know, because someone else, a couple that I do a series of shows with, Chris and Steve Crimi, they live there. They're interesting. They're a little older than you and I, but they have like a story, whatever thing you could think of, whatever topic you could think to bring up, they will have a story that is very interesting, right? Like they're great storytellers and keepers of information, and I see them as functioning as like the important elders in some ways of sort of this community, right? Because they have more experience than all of us.
Right.
But they're really open to the things that the younger kids are saying. They're not fixed in their ways like my parents are, or something like that, right? They're very flexible in their minds. But they live in Asheville, and they're just like, yeah, it's like insane. It's like all the, progressive Nazis and whatever it is. To what you're saying, though, you know what state has really held the best stance through all of this, through every iteration, through every wave? South Dakota, right? South Dakota, which everybody would think is probably like the smallest, coldest, most backward. You forget that that's even a state, right? Like they have a fairly young female governor, and she just decided early on, and has not shifted in any of this, that, it doesn't make sense to impose, like whatever you believe about the virus, it doesn't make sense to impose all of these uniform mandates because we don't have some of the issues that the other states have. In South Dakota, people are almost naturally social distanced because everything is far apart, right? So like many people don't ever see another person over the course of their day, much less have to worry about catching germs from them or anything like that. So to impose a mandate that would actually, people are farther apart than that, doesn't make any sense, right? and they don't have the level of tourism coming through there. They don't have an international airport. They don't have any of this stuff. So all of these rules that other governors or the federal government are trying, it doesn't pertain to them. So I'm not going to do them. I'm not going to do it just because it's like the uniform thing to do. I'm just going to go with what I go with all the rest of the time, is that like, I trust the people who live here to make a wise decision for what they want to do for their health based on their living circumstances, based on their circumstances. And that's it. That's all she said and done. She has not shifted in that. She is the only, I think she's one of only 3 governors whose states have never been on any form of lockdown, right? But she's been the most, like others have, things have been a little wavy based on the different cities in the state. Sometimes the state won't, but the cities will. South Dakota has been solid. Like, it's one of those things that's like, it's unfortunate the weather there is so unpleasant, because it would almost be appealing to move there otherwise. But yes. And so that's a place, just like what you're saying, that's right up there with Appalachia in terms of how people think about it.
Right.
Right. People from maybe urban people who grew up in urban environments, like you and I, how we've been trained to think about it. It's not in any way the reality of how those people are, but that's been like, that's what we would think based on the way our parents talked about those places, based on the way the news or Hollywood shows talked about those places. And that's the place where there's the most, like liberalism, if you go with the honest sense of the word liberalism, right?
Right. Like, at no point was there a sitcom of a bunch of 20-something Little Rock, Arkansas kids hanging out in a coffee shop. It's like, they don't. There was once a time like popular culture was a little bit more diverse than just telling big city stories. But yeah, it's we've been taught not to look in a certain place.
Yeah, just like everything else.
So, and what's funny also is what captures my attention is to see how there is like a calcifying in terms of stances, and this is leading to like people are, I think they're picking sides of like, I want to live in this state. Like, I would imagine if I lived in Tennessee and I was the one person wearing the mask in the grocery store, I'd want to go to Pennsylvania. I'd be like, I want to be with my brethren.
Yeah.
And like, it's the other way around. And I'm like, what I find is interesting about the nature of our conversation here is the idea of recognizing patterns and archetypes, and then being able to have a degree of then influence within them. And so recognizing this archetype of civil war, but then like going through the wormhole and not having it. And like, I'm like, okay, I'm seeing that. And so like, that's what I'm hoping to do as we have these conversations, is like, like begin to lay out that groundwork as we move through this period, like of this calcification of different elements, and not necessarily like, fall down the path which is being laid before.
Absolutely. All right. On that note, I want to run by a couple of things that happen. I would love to hear sort of what you found in terms of the way you termed it earlier, earth magic kind of stuff. I would love to hear possibly some of that, but I want to tell you a little bit about some things that came up in our trip, because I want to see you're good with this stuff, and I want to see sort of your perception of it. So first,
excellent.
The more idea of like looking for sort of the portals or the wormholes or the invisible colleges in some of these locations, right? So we were in Phoenix and we were staying downtown, and there is a downtown campus, a downtown part of the ASU is in Tempe, right, which is just sort of to the east of downtown Phoenix. But so that's where the main campus is. There's also portions of the campus in Scottsdale and portions of the campus downtown, right? So we're downtown, and we noticed. I noticed it when we were there last.
Give me 1 second. I want to pull up the map so I can see it as you're talking.
Okay.
All right. So give me 1 second. All right. Okay.
I can actually look and see if I can pull up some of these pictures.
So, all right. So okay. So you're saying, I see Phoenix.
Some of this and see if I have some of these pictures that I took while we were there that I can share with you. Let's see. Now those are different ones. Where's the ones from Phoenix? All right. Oh, here's some of them. Okay, here we go. All right. So we're in downtown Phoenix, and last time we were there, we had noticed this. I'm going to pull it up right now and share this one with you. We had noticed this. All right, pull this, screen share, this one. We had noticed this downtown. See that?
Yeah.
Okay. So that looks like a large margarita glass or something, or some kind of vortex, right? And then there's the reflection of it down on the grass below as well. So almost a double vortex.
Yeah.
Right? And this building over here that's like an old hotel. So there's all these brand new buildings in downtown Phoenix, which we have a theory on why they're huge, new stack and pack, super modern, right? Empty. But there's some old buildings, and that one to the left is one of them. It's called like Westward Ho, like a lot of these buildings are in old places, right? It's an old building, and there's like an obelisk of a radio tower on top, right? And if you stand in a certain angle when you're looking at this vortex, the blue vortex margarita glass thing, it's like the penis penetrating the vagina kind of thing, right? Like you see in a lot of these old monuments, like at a certain angle, it looks like that. But we're there, and that building right to the right of it in the photo, but really actually behind it when you're there, that says ASU, is the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism, right? And if you think about it, Walter Cronkite was really one of the first, when America like took—
He was the first, I guess.
Put a trustworthy, fatherly, like kind of like label on propaganda, right? He was the person that like told us the stuff that sounded really reasonable and he was trusted, but he was really laying down that foundation of BS that now fake news is all built upon, right? On a certain level. Okay, so that's right behind it. So we have this down here. This is downtown, okay? Then I noticed when we were staying with Laura's family who are in Scottsdale that there's another campus that has another kind of interesting vortexy looking thing, right? And it is, you see that?
Hold on. Which one?
Do you see, did a different picture come up, or I might have to stop? I might have to stop the share.
Yeah.
For the new one. Okay, hold on. So then there's this, right? And this, see that?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so this is at the Scottsdale campus, which, right, and the Tempe campus, which is the main campus of ASU, is between the two. So this is like a similar kind of vortex, but faced the other way. And this is from a campus that is called Project Sky Song, right? Which is like a smart campus. Everything is integrated, like, right, you have companies there, like companies like Oracle and high-tech companies that are on this campus where students create artwork that looks like this and is also functional, and they also live there. And everything is smart. Everything is very like glass, metal, right, kind of thing. And it's actually called Project Sky Song. That's what this is called, right? So you have like the vortex downtown that seems to be pulling something in, and this one seems to be like stopping something from leaving, right? Like a cap, like a catcher, right? There's like some kind of energy coming through or something. It was kind of how I felt. But I mean, the vortexes sort of go both ways here, right? There's some that have the like the funnel up top and some where the funnel is down low. But there's this idea of funneling something out of the atmosphere at both of these places. Then in between these two, you have the downtown, the main campus, ASU, which there's been talk for a long time that, that there's a lot of intelligence that things go on there. Like there's a lot of this thing here, right here is part of a partnership with intelligence agencies and corporations right here, right? It's a way of having some of these like corporate, how like if CIA wants to open a company, they're not supposed to be able to do that. So they do it through that thing called Incutel. You've heard this before, right? Like Facebook was funded through Incutel. Okay, so this is a way of putting the corporations under the ownership of the universities, right? And we know that intelligence agencies have presence on universities, but this is a way to be able to control some of that corporate stuff through a university as opposed to having to create completely, fake corporations to be able to do it, right? So I thought that was interesting. But in between is the main campus that has like an interesting like fake harbor, like it's some kind of ocean through a river that's going through very close to the campus. And this is also where one of Dave Paulides' missing people went missing, right? Like on the river of Tempe that is sort of in the main campus that is between these two things. So I don't know what this is, but I thought it was kind of interesting that, we had this sort of artwork, these huge art installations that, on both of the satellite campuses that were sort of off base from the real one, and they're all in a line. Like there is a straight line between where that big margarita glass is and this one is, like almost like something being sucked in. Like there's a connection between the two.
So I'm looking at the map right now of Arizona State University. Where exactly would I find them on like a street map?
So like it's in Tempe, and
right.
Main Street is Mill. It was the one that we saw. I think that was the main. It was Mill, and there was like one like El Coronado or El something or going the other way.
Right.
Mill was the one that went along. I have it on. Is it on the phone? It's on my phone. I think the name of that first one that I told you. This is the second one I showed you was Project Sky Song. The name of the first one was kind of interesting. This one is just a couple years old. The one downtown was like 10 or 12 years old.
Oh, I see where Mill is.
Okay.
Okay, so probably near the art museum.
There's an art museum down there. Yeah.
Like I see that there's. It looks like there's. So I'm on Mill. What am I looking for?
So so Mill is like the main street that goes through
the
main campus. And if you follow Mill up to the end, it leaves you at this area that like is right at a river where they have created this like they call it like a harbor or a marina, which is hilarious to think of a marina in Arizona.
Right.
But if you remember, Bill Hicks had that comedy CD called Arizona Bay, right? So it's just a weird, interesting place. But that along that piece of water up there is where one of Dave Paulides' one of his missing 411 people went missing.
All right, let me see.
Yeah.
She has to let me walk around in there. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I see where you are. I'm walking around in there. Yeah, I would. I'd be curious to see what Phoenix's history is, but I mean, the very nature of like sun devils and like all of this like Diablo, like written into the language of the area. And then I'm seeing all like there's a Delay Park, like Delay Plaza, and there's like a Lyndon Park, like LBJ, and like
Delay Plaza sounds like Daily Plaza.
Yeah, that's what I meant. It's Park here. There's a connection with the Broadmoor. I mean, the Phoenix, just the name Phoenix itself, like this, all of the area, all of Arizona.
Because it brings up things about heat and about time, right? Like kind of things. So you have Phoenix, you have Tempe. It's super interesting. So we didn't quite know what to make of it, but we're like, this is interesting. And then downtown where we were staying, where that first one was. So we noticed like it was a little different last time we were there because people were more out and about in the streets because there was a feeling of things being opened up and whatever. This time things were a little different, but there's all of these stack and pack kind of buildings that themselves almost look like some kind of technology, right? Like if you looked at them from above, it would look like the motherboard or a computer chip in the right system. But all of these buildings are empty, right? And they're all these like very modern buildings, except for these few very old buildings, right? And I don't know. So Jeff, who we were traveling with, he really follows a lot of the data streams about like Tartaria and the reset kind of thing, right? And so we started talking about this idea that one of the things that may be coming, we've also talked a lot about parallel universes and parallel timelines and realities merging or separating or whatever, that maybe there's something coming where like whatever, if let's say that two parallel realities are about to merge, right?
All right.
And in that other one, downtown Phoenix is full of people, right? This one, it's empty. So they're literally creating space for them before this merger happens.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
of it is fucking empty downtown, right? Literally, like, the Phoenix is a big city. Like, there was times when there was nobody else on any of the streets that we were on except for us. Huh? On the weekend, right? Like on the weekend. And, you know, you might go into a couple places, a bar or a coffee place, and there'll be a few people there. But you remember when you were little and you wanted to go to an amusement park and your parents were like, fuck no, I hate going there, so many people. But if we're going to go, we're going to like take a day off of school. So we go when no one's there. And it's like a ghost town, right? Like, this was way more extreme than that. There was nobody there. In fact, we went out to dinner for my birthday. My birthday was while we were there. And we go to this restaurant. It's a very nice restaurant, right? But it was the day that things felt the most tense and locked down there, right? So they're saying that everything is closed, but actually there's some really nice places that are open. All the super nice places we tried to go, they were all open and, you know, whatever. So we go to this beautiful restaurant in this old, like, it was sort of somewhere between a Craftsman and a Victorian style house, right? But like a really pretty restaurant. And we were the only ones there. So like, you know, that's kind of nice for your birthday, you know, with your person and whatever, right? And like, we're the only ones there, and they're like, oh, but the bar is closed. You can only get beer and wine. I'm a cocktail person, right? So you can't get any cocktails tonight. But then we asked, like, Laura said, like, can we please get a cocktail? And they're like, okay, right? There's some fake impediments being put there, right? And if you just like, because they're like, everything is supposed to be shut down, but we end up having the entire restaurant to ourselves, right? And the chef comes out and talks to us and brings us dessert and makes us, you know, recommendations for other restaurants that he likes. We would never normally, like, people spend thousands of dollars to rent out entire restaurants for their birthday dinner or whatever, right? We just got to have that. Like, the whole attention of the entire place was on us, right? So like, this is a hidden upside to this weird kind of situation, right? And then we go to like another bar afterwards, and it's still, even though there's nobody on the streets, there's this feeling of tension. But you go, once you're into the bar, right, everybody's, you know, the tables are distanced because that's what the rules are, but everybody's laughing, nobody's really obeying it. People are walking by other tables without masks. Everything feels normal in that contained space. So it's kind of like, you know, you have to play this little game or go along with the charade, but on the end of it, on the other side of it, like, okay, like, that was actually really cool, right? Like, it was cool to get that experience of having the whole place to ourselves and all of the attention of the chef and the person working and whatever kind of on us, and everything we asked for, we were able to get, right? Like, it was presented as like, we're not doing this, but then you just ask and you can get it, right? And so it kind of goes to what you're saying, is like, they're saying these are the rules, but they're not really the rules.
Yeah, maybe that's part of the way which we navigate. It's like you have to ask a question 3 times.
Yeah.
You have to say, you have to go by, if you are the one who's being asked the question of, you have to say no the first 2 times. No, that's okay. Well, if you ask that way.
Yeah, well, that was kind of it. Like, I got up to go to the restroom. Laura asks him in a different way, and before I know it, he's back with a cocktail for me, and you know what I mean, and whatever. So it's like, there is a way around all of this, right? Like,
right.
There's no place that we really wanted to go. Like, for me, I'm a foodie, so when I travel, it's all like, the activities are all what's going to happen between the meals, right? I'm a foodie, and all the places we really wanted to go to eat, we got to go. There was less people there. The service was nicer, you know, because of that. And is somebody knocking on the door? I thought I heard pounding. I'm sorry. You know, and it was just kind of, you know, it like worked out, right? Like, we went to another place on the day that was actually my birthday, and we had this like amazing server who like just was like, you know, I don't think this is a real thing. I'm kind of a conspiracy theorist. I like to listen to a lot of alternative media, having no idea, you know, what we all do and whatever. So we had this great experience with him, and it brought another free dessert. Like, it was free desserts all around everywhere we went, right? So I don't normally get that much free stuff at restaurants, but everywhere we went, there was something interesting happening, and, you know, this kind of stuff. So like, there's something, you know, like, maybe things are never going to be how they were, but like, maybe that's cool to have a restaurant all to yourself on your birthday.
Well, what about this? You know, as you were telling me this story, the lead into this story was about your friend who sees things. You're describing his perspective and parallel universes and
Yeah.
like the empty buildings and like, so, okay. So if we're going to be open to that, let's be like, let's have more resolution, like not just like empty buildings and full buildings, but just like, so I would suggest like having the experience of being the only person within a restaurant would be like from the experiential, like not, that's what it would look like. Like it feels like you're part of everything, but when you really get down to it, no one else is in the restaurant. And like, these are the types of like, when I say reality is up for grabs, I'm like this is what weird shit looks normal. It's only weird if you recognize it in context of being weird. And we're seeing all of this sort of like kind of cool sort of stuff. So the question I have for you is, what did you have for your birthday dinner?
Which one?
Well, you tell me. You got to tell me about one.
So the one the one that was in a little house where we were the only people there had actually like some of the best scallops I'd ever had, which is odd for you to think like in Los Angeles or somewhere near the ocean. But this was, this guy, like he's been written up all over the place for his scallops, this chef. They were amazing. Everything else there was just good, but the scallops were amazing. And then on my actual birthday dinner, when we were out with Jeff as well, we had an amazing tomahawk steak. And we had truffle mashed potatoes and cream spinach, and we had the coolest smoked Manhattan ever. It was like served to us in this huge decanter that was like all full of smoke on top of the cocktail, and it was like a big cocktail. You didn't have to order a second one because it was a big cocktail, and we had this great conspiracy waiter at that one, and yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Look at so Laura just pulled this up. If you can see, that's what that thing downtown looks like at night when it's lit up.
Underneath it, yeah, that's a vortex.
Yeah, and it's it's called Her Secret is Patience.
Her secret is patience. That sounds a little creepy to me. I mean, that's just me.
Yeah, that's crazy, right?
Like that's how you would describe a black widow, like waiting, just waiting. That
looks like a web, doesn't it? Look like
it's like her.
It's actually made of netting. When you look at it, like there's the bars that are the blue things and whatever, but the things that are between it, it's all a net. So they're catching something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was that was kind of the deal there in Phoenix. But this idea of like, maybe part of the reason that there's been this sort of shutdown, right? Because there's definitely there's not much activity going on in like downtown LA, right? Or in downtown Phoenix or whatnot. So like part of the clearing out, maybe making space for like the merger of other realities, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's like, like they're doing this thing that is causing people to want to move out to the suburbs, right? Which they say isn't what they want. They say that they want to stack and pack cities, but they always tell us opposite of what is true, right? So if they're trying to push people a little further out so that there'll be room for these new people that might be showing up, right? And if you pay attention to any of these Tartaria kinds of things, oftentimes the new population that comes in to take the place of the old population shows up in the old train stations downtown, the old buildings and train stations, right? They don't come on a train, they just seem to emerge from these buildings. And in all the downtowns where they're building this modern shit, they've left a few of these old buildings, including the old post offices, the old train stations, the old bus stations, all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Like those old buildings are the one connector between the various universes. Like they're like an ancient technology that's where the connection, like when the merger happens, that's where the pass through is.
And I think we're learning to align what to look for.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what this is about right now. And we're seeing it. Like I say this in jest, like part of like, so you're talking about like coming in, like seeing, you were describing people, but I look at it like my primary lens is always experience. Yeah. And the experience feels the same. Like, it's not like, I jumped off of a diving board and then like it feels completely different when I'm underwater than, it seems to be more subtle because the reality which I left Pennsylvania and which I returned were different.
Yeah.
It's a different world. It's 99.99% the same, but that tweaked. And
Yeah.
some places are like even more so. Like as you described, I would say is a heightened experience if your birthday, if you're a foodie, like there's one thing be like, oh, I'm gonna go out to dinner on my birthday. But like for like I can hear like the excitement in your voice of like you like the celebration and the birthday and the experience and you like the so this is it for you. And then to go and have like a heightened experience, which is perfect for your values, for like the what how you look at it. Like this is it. This is what it looks like. That's how you experience it. That's a heightened experience.
We also had, since you're liking my descriptions of these things, I'll entertain you with one more. The morning of the birthday, we went to breakfast brunch at this place that, oh, this is perfect for this. That was called Dick's Hideaway, and it was almost impossible to find. And we recognized that, oh, they do this on purpose so that dumb people won't come, right? Like there's no signs, nothing like that. It just looks like a weird, like broken door or something like that. You go in there in the middle of the day when it's like 120 out in Phoenix, it's almost pitch black in there except for just like around the tables. And you walk in and everybody who's sitting at the bar sort of turns and looks at you like, like they weren't expecting you or something like that. And there's this back room we go in to eat because we were a table of 4. And it was like this really good, like New Mexico style, like green chili and, like a pork adobada and eggs and whatever, right? But it's like, you feel like you're in some sort of like old saloon in the far west or whatever that like only some people know about and you have to kind of sneak in and whatever. And the food was great and the drinks were good. And it was just, I was like, oh, this is, if I have a restaurant or a bar, I want it to kind of be like this, right? But everything, it had that sort of element about it of like what we've been talking about. And it was even called Dick's Hideaway, right? So it was very, and it was one of those surreal experiences where like, the waiter didn't talk much, people in there weren't that friendly, but the food was amazing and you kind of got your own little corner to yourself to just, chat with your people and whatnot. And I was like, I love this. This is awesome.
So something popped into my head as you were describing that.
Yeah.
Like Dick's Hideaway, like initially, like what popped in my head. Do you remember the Bistro? I think it was called the Bistro.
What is that?
It's a place where like Jack and Chrissy and the Furleys used to hang out.
Oh, in Three's Company.
Yes. Was it called the Bistro? So I first started thinking about the Bistro, like as you were saying, like Jack's Hideaway, like that's what popped in my head, like the visual culture. And then as you're going down, it trained into Fantasy Island. Like think about like what Fantasy Island was, like what it represented, and like Mr. Rourke and the flying into the plane, and like like we're kind of like living in that time right now. Like that's what that feels more like the experience than really anything else that we could all kind of like touch and describe.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. And this trip was full of that stuff. Like,
yes,
sit out there on the streets, but when you finally found your little place, it was like, oh, this is a cool experience. Like, this is interesting. And I just, I think all the cool stuff going forward, I mean, it always has been on a certain level. I've always been, very tied to the underground. Like, I never liked the big festivals. I like the weird underground parties and the dark, dingy warehouses. And,
right.
I like the stuff that's off the beaten path and a little bit weird and whatever. And maybe my attraction to that was just my training to be able to understand that code and be able to land someplace and find that really quickly. I'm good at digging out where the good little spots are.
All right. So how do we go and create a network?
Okay.
With as little effort as possible, which is what I would imagine would be like, on the existing network. Like what's immediately popping in my head is Craigslist.
Right.
Like how would you go and create like a subculture of like, I'm coming into town and I want to meet up with the like-minded. I want to find out about the cool places to go and like whatever, like, whatever it's going to be, like, this is how we're building like real connections. Okay. How do we do that?
So this is interesting. Like early on, like before I was ever making shows, but when I was kind of already like, I was working like my friend Robert Phoenix, who's an astrologer who I also do a show with, I'm doing with him later today. He and I once had a conversation when I was trying to move into whatever the next thing I was going to do was that I was going to be like some sort of like concierge for like weird experiences or interesting sort of kinds of things like that, and that I could have like like a list, like a Craigslist, or like I think there's one for like household services and things called Emily's List. Actually, that's not me, but it's someone else, where it's like this is where you go to like find that stuff. So obviously, if we're talking about something like that, it has to be sort of not easy to access for the general person or whatever. Maybe it's even just hidden in plain sight.
That's what I meant, hidden in plain sight. Like that's the most fun for me.
Yeah, that is kind of like what is it? An aggregator of the cool places and cool experiences, and who sort of like who lives where or whatever, so that you're going through this way, you can meet up with these people. So maybe something like that. Like maybe there's somebody in our extended group here who's good at sort of, who could, they have like things called Discord servers that I don't even know how that exactly works, right? But I think you have to be like a part of that group to like have access to what's there, kind of thing. A little bit different than your regular, or even just like a certain kind of message board, but maybe even just like, a segment of the website, of a website that is sort of behind, like
right,
password protected, where people can go and see all this stuff. Like these are the places, these are the cool bed and breakfast, or so-and-so lives here, or this restaurant is cool, or this bar is cool, or you know what I mean? Or this place, like, I don't know, we were just at this corner of this place and that place, and the energy there was fucking wild, and there's a portal to another universe right there, whatever it is, where we can start sort of compiling some of these things. So instead of having, how they have like, if you go to AAA, they have those tour books that show you like all the hotels and all the sites and all the restaurants or whatever in a place, but this would be more for like weirdos like us and what we like.
I think there's something to that. But the other thing is I still want to meet up with people. I don't want to just have an experience. So I'll give you an example. So I'm going, I want to plan a trip up to, there's a place which I haven't been to in the Susquehanna, which is known as, it's Standing Stone. It's this very, very unique geological anomaly of a stone in the river. It's like 40 feet and like straight down. And it was where Marie Antoinette, where her and her entourage were going to live when they were freeing France. So it was known as French Azure.
Have you talked about this before?
Yeah. So I'm going up there.
I've heard this before. Okay, yeah.
So I'm going up there, and there's a couple other places I want to go up. I want to continue up to the Finger Lakes.
Yeah.
And how do I find the folks?
How do you find? Well, maybe
like I'm going to go there.
Maybe
how do I find?
Yeah.
I want to go at least put like something out there, like, hey, I'm going here. And if you're a folk, like I'd find you.
Yeah.
I don't know what that would be.
All right. We need to create sort of a space for that kind of thing, right?
All right.
Just that sort of like where you can just throw that out, and then the people who want to respond to that, because either they are already there or they're interested in it too, so they kind of want to meet up for a little experience there and whatever. Yeah. All right. So these are some of the things that we have. We're creating our little working group, and these are some of the things that some of us can work on. All right, we've been going for a bit now, so I think let's take a quick break and then go over to the patron segment. Before we move to that, Michael, tell people where they can find you.
You could go to susquehannaalchemy.com. I'm doing dream tracking for people's specific stories. So, you can order one of those. I call it a Starboard Light and a whole bunch of other stuff there. You could go and see some of my videos at Susquehanna Alchemy on YouTube or at subscribestar.com/Susquehanna Alchemy.
All right, cool, guys. Go check it out. He has some interesting stuff there, and we will see you on the other side. Patreon.com/Off Planet Media. See you over there. Bye.